well, it's probably never the appropriate time for me to let some of my emotions out, right?
Not on people, but you can let it.
Well, self-control is a really important thing to teach men, right? So this is a really great example of cultural differences and how they can manifest, right? Like just imagine if you had an entire culture of men that was the tenets of masculinity that were taught and agreed to by everybody, right? Like, what would our world look like, right? Because men are a lot of our problem, right? And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with men. As a matter of fact, I really like being a man, and I really enjoy, like, the things that there are to enjoy about us, right? You know, but I also think that if you're careless with it, that we can't, like, there are aspects of masculinity that are dangerous, right? And I do think that toxic masculinity is real and a real thing that we're dealing with. What do you think about toxic femininity? You think that's real?
Yeah. I mean, I never put a title to it, but I think it's real.
Yeah, I just read an article that was put out the other day. It was written by a feminist, and it was about toxic femininity. And I think that that's a valid point, because I think that Western culture in general is toxic, right? Not that women are toxic, but that Western culture is generally toxic, and that in a toxic culture, both masculinity and femininity manifest as toxic, right? And, like, because I think masculinity and femininity, like, are both great and amazing things, people are wired differently, and that's okay. You know, I alluded to it earlier, but I said that I think that one of the things that gets lost in kind of like this academic conversation about culture and things like that, you know, that is actually like the deeply spiritual part of it, right? You know, and I mean, that scheme of information, it's one of the most important parts about you. You know, this is some of your experiences. This is your the thing that taught you how to be, right? You know, and this scheme of information is so important, and it's so beautiful, and it's like, so when you talk about it in like this kind of academic, like breaking it down into like, oh, this is culture and tradition and blah blah blah, right? You know, like it feels like it robs it of some of its humanity, you know, and that's not my intention, you know, but it's like explaining this thing in a really mundane way, saying that like actually this thing's really magical. You know, but like I'm explaining it in a really mundane way so that you understand what it is, but it's magical, right? You know,
this is what I'm going to go back to Therese Marie Malhut for Heartberries. She has a really great quote in there about like her mom, and like some things can't be explained through words. They're too big. They're too great. Like you can't explain them. Like a symbol or a song or like a, you know, something that will better describe it, you know, and it's just never through words. It's never going to be attainable through words.
There's some shit where I feel like if I try to explain it, you just watch me cry. Yeah. You know, because I can't. Like it's like, no, this thing, it's real though, you know, and it's there, and I saw it and I felt it, you know, and like, but I don't know how to tell you about it, you know, and it's frustrating.
Are you fluent in Yupik?
No.
So I talked with Megan Albana Stimple, and I was having the same conversation with her, and she's like, you should learn to speak in Yupik.
I agree, right? Because there's ideas in there.
You might learn to better express yourself through your native language.
You know, when I was growing up, there, like, it just felt like there was no opportunity, right? I mean, this is why I tried to kill myself when I was 15, I think. I remember it, you know, like, there was no future, you know? Like,
did you really feel that?
Yeah. Like, but look, we had just moved to Palmer, right? Not just moved to Palmer, but we lived there for a few years. My dad was in jail for molesting my sister. You know, there was 7 of us in a small apartment in Palmer. You know, we were on welfare, and that's when it was still the paper bills that, you know, so everybody knew we were on welfare. Like, I wasn't doing well in school. I was real awkward looking. Girls didn't like me. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't see a future for myself. And if you would have told, like, 15-year-old me, be like, dog, the truth is that you're not going to hit your stride until you're 30. But, like, the reality is that you're going to end up in a good place. Like the world that you're in now is nothing like the world that I'm in now, right? Like, I have a great marriage with a wife that I love very much. I have beautiful kids. I have a great family. We love each other, you know, and like, but I couldn't see that from that point. You know what I mean? Like, I just couldn't. How would I have traced that path, you know, from there to there?
No, I mean, if you could talk to yourself, 15-year-old you, I know that's so cliche, and I
know.
Well,
I would just say, like what would I say to my son, right, at his age? And it is the things that we talk about, because suicide's on their radar. Like my brother that died was their favorite uncle, right? And he used to come over every single weekend and play with them, right? And so they know. This is already a conversation that I've had with, like, my 10-year-old and 7-year-old son, about, like, hey, what we talk about is I say, look, you never give up. We never give up. We always, it's a line that I borrow from Cormac McCarthy's The Road about carrying the fire, right? And I tell them, I was like, you have a fire that was put there, and it wasn't put there by you, it was put there by God, and you don't put it out. You protect it. Even when it's at its lowest, you protect it, There will come a day when you die. All of us do it. You only have to live this one life as far as we know, and so you just got to stick it out, There's good things. There's things that are worth it in everybody's life, little tiny things, of course. The world that I saw was not a lie. The chances that I would end up with the life that I have right now are pretty small. And I'm not trying to, like, pat myself on the back here, right? But, like, my life's pretty amazing, And the chances are is that I wouldn't make it. The chances for most young Native men, kind of future is there for our boys. And if there's no future for our boys, what sort of future are there for our women? White husbands. I'm sorry, I can't say that without qualifying it, because I'm kind of joking. I remember a long time ago, Julian Jacobs brought it up on Facebook, and he asked, like, he just straight up, like, called out all these Native women on, like, well, if you're so all about our culture and so all about our people, then how come all y'all are married to white men, right? And boy, that was a storm, right? But it was a good, legitimate question, and there was a lot of really good answers, right? It's like, my wife's not Native, right? I fell in love with her. What am I going to do about that? I don't love anybody else like that, right? But so I think the biggest part about the discussion, or the most important part about the discussion, was that there was a recognition that the vast majority of Native men couldn't provide these women with the life that they wanted, with the security that they wanted, with everything that they needed, and that there are very few, a relatively small number of Native men that can provide that for you, right?
I honestly think that men are taking a lot longer to bounce back.
Yeah, I think it is taking us a longer time, but I also think that, like, on some level that we were probably targeted harder, right? Because, like, Native women still have value to white men. Native men don't. Native men don't have value to white women. Well, okay. Nowadays, right? But 50, 100 years ago, do you think there was very many white women that would be willing to marry a Native man, right? And Native women, like I said, they have utility to whites in a way that Native men don't, right? So, like, in our role, our place, like the men's house, that was destroyed, right? That was our place. That was the place where you learned how to be a man, and where you got taught, and where the society, like, the community of men existed, and in the ways that we help and support each other, right? And that's gone, and so I think this is part of the reason why, right? Because it's like, so when you look at traditional roles, right? Like, what were women's traditional roles, right? And did those go away? Do we still need mothers? Hell yeah, we do. More than ever, right? But, like, and so there, the roles that women played in a traditional society versus the roles that men played are much more applicable to this world than the hunter and the shaman. I remind people of this all the time, is that, like, we actually had a conception of God before you got here, and it's like, so are we talking about something different here, right? Did you really bring us something new, right? Or did you just bring us the same thing that we already had? And I argue, that we probably knew God better, because, like in the North, like, I feel like it's like, that's, God's true nature, like, it's like, well, because it's like, I identify more with Old Testament God than I do with New Testament God, right? Like meaning, like, the old narrative of, like, when God was still gangster, right? That this is when you didn't fuck with God in the Old Testament, right? Because if you fuck with God in the Old Testament, he'd fuck you up.
Warren told me the story of Job from the Bible, which can be summed up by God allowing Satan to test the faith of an honorable and loyal servant named Job. Through this, Job experiences grief, pain, and affliction, and eventually starts to question God. But then, all of a sudden, God appears as a whirlwind and ensures Job acknowledges God's unlimited power and admits the limitations of his human knowledge.
It's trust. It's kind of like that leadership thing, right? So it's like, remember when you're a kid and you trust your parents because they know things that you don't, right? And could you imagine your parents trying to, like, explain nuanced concepts to you as a 3-year-old, right? And then that's the analogy here, right? That, like, assume this is the mistake that people make when they're reading and understanding biblical stories, right? They teach shit at Harvard, they teach the shit at Yale, because this stuff's actually important for understanding the context of your own culture, right? A lot of our American Western culture comes from the Bible, right? And so what this story was about was that, it's like, hey, this God was telling him, it's like, I'm sorry that you can't understand what's going on here, but I'm doing the right thing. Like, what I'm doing here is righteous, right? So yeah, this is a long story of saying that, like, this is my attitude towards God, right? Because I do believe in God. Is that, like, I just concede that the things that, if there were a God, the things that God would know are way beyond anything that I could even imagine. We don't even know what God's story is. We don't know what God has been through. What if God has been, like, spent the last 70 billion years just as the most incredibly loneliest, like, who the f*** even knows what God's story is, right? Do we even know what's going on here in order for us to make a judgment about what's right and what's wrong and about what's righteous and what's not, right? And you can make some argument about, like, but people's unnecessary deaths and things like that. Like, but what if this isn't the final reality? And that seems to be, it's within the realm of possibility, right? So, like, when we were talking about things like the ancestor simulation hypothesis, the idea that this could be a simulation being put on by our ancestors or something like that, right? So, like, you die in here and you just wake up in the simulation room. You know what I mean? So, like, was killing you, like, a sin? Or was it just, like, this temporary, There's more going on here than people give credit for. Like, seriously, we don't buy the idea that this is mundania. This is not fucking mundania. I don't know what's going on here. I seriously don't. But whatever it is amazing. Whatever it is special. Whatever it is sacred.
Whew! Thank you, Warren Maaruk Jones, for sharing your perspectives and planting the seeds of what Northern philosophy means. Hauk, I think I need a nap now after dropping all that knowledge. If you'd like to read up on his philosophy, check out the episode link on the Coffee and Clock website. Quyana Maaruk, I really sharpened my recognition of curse word sound waves in these past 2 episodes. Remember, folks, Coffee and Clock episodes are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Patreon, Stitcher, and directly on the Coffee and Clock website. I have a couple of special episodes in the works that will only be accessible to Patreon supporters. Koyanakbuk to our existing Coffee and Clock Patreon supporters: Tiffany Creed, Shannon Hawkins, Jessica Smith, Heather Dingman, Emily Kwan, Delula Erickson, Crude Magazine, AK, and Amos Stinkowitz. I see you! You all are the patuk to our bones, the berries to our akutuk, and the zing to our mickeyuk. I'm Alice Kenny Glenn, over and out.